Hello there. Welcome to another episode of The Bliss of the Abyss, featuring me, your host, Mr. Robert Newmark Jones, although you can call me Ruskin Denmark if you absolutely insist. How are you doing? Sorry, it's been a little while for an episode. I have been dealing with quite severe jet lag and my usual case of food poisoning never seems to pass. So I've got a bit of a different show for you today. It's a conversation with actor, activist, and candidate for New York City Council District 6, Jeffrey Omura. Me and Jeffrey have been friends for about a decade now. And he's recently become much more involved in politics, and he's looking to run for election in District 6 in New York City this June. So to all my American listeners, please consider supporting him, whether that be voting for him or donating time or money, probably is better, in any way that you can. And he's also just a fantastic actor, and that's actually how we met. And he's been in all kinds of big shows and small shows and everything in between, and he's just a thoroughly decent human being. And this was a really good chat, and we talked about all kinds of things. I mean, one thing we didn't talk about, having a look at his little bio here, is he had a job with the NYC Human Resource Administration as an undercover agent, where I sat in waiting rooms getting to know mothers and children who were applying for public assistance. The privilege of my upbringing came in sharp focus. These were underpaid working families whose incomes alone weren't enough to survive. It's a reality for far too many in New York City. Yeah, amen. He's a campaigner for better working conditions, for fairer wages, and I think he'd make a really good politician. And I don't say that lightly because I'm not a big fan of politicians. But there are good ones out there, aren't there? And so this is a conversation that is quite a lot about politics, but also about how we know each other. And there's some funny showbiz stories thrown in there as well. I have recorded half of a solo episode that will be coming out either this week or next week. The reason it has been delayed is the aforementioned stomach issues. So halfway through recording this episode, I think I started to develop a fever and then spent the next sort of few days getting very well acquainted with the kind of feeling. Without going into further detail, I'm sure we don't need to, and I don't want to ruin Jeffrey's episode up top with talking about my digestive problems. So instead, what I will do is I will launch straight into this episode. Like I said, it's with Jeff and myself. He's running for candidacy in New York City. Everything can be found at jeffreyomura.com. That's Jeffrey with a J. And I'll put the links and everything in the show notes. And yeah, just have a look around and have a listen. And I think whichever side of the political spectrum you find yourself, all the way to the left, all the way to the right, somewhere in the middle, like a lot of us, I think listen to what he's got to say, hear him out. I think he's an eminently sensible, charming, and brilliant human. And I hope you enjoy this episode of The Bliss of the Abyss, and I'll talk to you again soon.
What is this camera you're on here?
Oh, does it look terrible?
No, you look amazing.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
There we go. I got it for free off Amazon. There was
what kind of camera is it?
It's just a little cheapy webcam, but
Oh,
yeah, they gave it to me in exchange for a positive review, which I was happy to give.
oh, so you're a whore.
You knew that already, didn't you?
Can you hear this leaf blower right now? He just started back up again.
No, no.
Okay, great.
Can you hear me? Okay, I can hear you
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
hear you great.
Great. There we go. So all of the problems of the internet have been solved by us. Look at that. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's been a pretty wild few months. I guess it's been a wild year, hasn't it?
It's definitely been a wild year. Yeah, I'd say so. What is it now? It's the 3rd of March, right? So, because the memories that are starting to pop up in my Facebook are like from a year ago when we were just about to be on the West End. So that means the pandemic was just about to hit the UK.
Wait, what were you working on?
Yeah, I was gonna immediately make this about me. Why don't I?
Are we recording right now?
We're recording if that's okay. Yeah.
This is part of the show? I'm not ready.
It doesn't have to be part of the show. We can cut it all out, don't worry. And I'll give you a proper intro like ahead of time and stuff like that.
Great.
Yeah, I was in a play that was it was called One Jewish Boy. That was me. And yeah, it was we got about a week in to the West End, just enough to get the reviews and all the stars, and then it ended.
Oh no, I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean, it's the same story as all the actors on the West End and on Broadway. I have so many friends who were making their Broadway debut or they're about to open a show. And then the rug got pulled out from under them.
That's right. I mean, this was technically my West End debut, so I'm actually thankful that I managed to make it. Briefly. We were actually going to tour the country and come to Broadway as well, but
really,
yeah. But I mean, you guys locked down, I think, 2 days before we did the closure of Broadway and stuff, and so I knew it was coming at that point. Yeah.
Well, I would actually have to sign off on that.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I serve on the board of directors of my union, Actors. It's Actors Equity.
Yeah.
Of the U.S.
Yeah.
And we have like a reciprocal agreement with British Equity.
Of course.
But the visa rules are really tight, and anytime a British citizen comes over here to work on one of our stages on Broadway, the union has to sign off, and I chair the committee that signs off on that.
Oh, wow. Well, look, I think it was the right decision. So, props to you there. I mean, I've recently had to come to the States for non-work purposes, and it was crazy, Jeff. I mean, it was like crazy for the right reasons, but I was at
they let you in.
They let me in because I'm married to Caitlin, but I was at the gate for an hour and a half while they were on the phone with Homeland Security. Like, it was that tricky to get in. And then
what were they saying to Homeland Security?
Well, I have no idea because I was not privy to. They moved away, but there's about the ESTA, right?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's like an electronic visa that all visitors to the States have to get, basically. So I got mine as I always do. And then I got to the gate and they're like, yeah, they've cancelled your ESTA. They're cancelling all ESTAs because no British nationals are allowed in the country right now. Luckily, I had a marriage license and I had, all of my ducks in a row, but it was still just, wild. And I calculated it the other day. I was wearing, because we had to not get COVID, right? I mean, obviously, everyone has to not get COVID, but we had to not get COVID so that we could test out of quarantine so we could go to the funeral, right? But that meant that like our gear, we looked like the crazy people. We had the gloves, we had 2 masks, we had the face shield, we were, spraying every surface and wiping everything down. And
so you had to quarantine before you went to the funeral?
Quarantine, yeah. As when you arrive in the States, you have to quarantine and then test out of it. So I was in all that gear for roughly 24 hours. door to door.
Wow. Well, I'm glad they let you in.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got to see family.
Yeah.
And do what you needed to do. It was, it was a year ago this week that my grandmother died.
Oh,
she died just a few days before the whole country started shutting down, and I got to fly home back to Michigan for the funeral.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking the whole time how lucky we were.
Yeah.
That if she had died just a few days later,
oh my God.
we may not have been able to have a funeral.
Yeah.
Because everything then was so uncertain. And then after the funeral, getting back on the plane to fly to New York, which at the time was the epicenter. I was like, what am I doing? Maybe I should just stay here in Michigan where it seemed safe enough. But I getting into a taxi at LaGuardia Airport and driving back into Manhattan, and the streets are empty.
Oh,
what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is where I've been for the last year, staring at the four walls of my apartment.
Yeah, like we all have, huh? How strange. I mean, yeah, I would not recommend international travel to anyone right now. As horrible as it is being locked down at home and staying here, going on a plane was actually worse. So, small blessings. I'm glad to hear that you managed to do all of that without the COVID stuff, because a COVID funeral is no joke. It is just a horror show. But let's not start things off on this, hey?
It's so great to see you. I've literally not seen you in years.
I actually haven't seen you in years. I know, it's so bizarre. I was thinking about this the other day when we said that we were going to do this. It's like, when was the last time I saw Jeffrey? Because it was in New York on one of my visits, but it must have been half a decade ago. I don't know, something like that.
I think it's when we went to that flea market in Brooklyn.
Yes, it is.
I bought a pair of glasses there.
Are they still in circulation?
I still have them. I don't. They're still in a drawer somewhere. But we should let everyone know how we met.
Yes, I know, right? Our origin story, Jeffrey.
Yeah, so it was. Picture it. What year was that? 2011.
I think 2011 or 12. Yeah, one of those.
Oh no, 11. Definitely 11. Maybe 2010. So we were in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
We were both performing in different shows, and I just wandered into the theater and I sat down. Didn't know anything about this play you were in, and I just remember what I do remember about it is that you gave just this remarkable performance, and I had to meet you, and so I introduced myself after. Because I'm a pretty tough critic. I'm the worst person to go to the theater with.
That sounds like my favorite kind of guest.
I don't like anything. But there's the rare occasion you see a performance where as an actor you're like, I don't know how to do that. And it's pretty cool to have those experiences. And that was my experience when I saw you on stage. So
wow.
And now I'm lucky to call you a friend.
Yeah, and you're the only person who's ever given me such a glowing review. So, and then I came and saw your show, which I think, am I right? Was it called Hamlet in 3D?
It was, yeah.
Aha! I knew my mind wasn't that eroded, which was a fantastic show. And we hung out quite a few times in Edinburgh as well. And then we just maintained our friendship ever since. I mean, it's one of those rare sort of cool things that happens in life where you meet a like-minded soul, and even though we live in different countries and have crazy different backgrounds, none of that ever mattered.
Well, there's a reason for that, I believe, and I'm not into astrology whatsoever, but but we share the same birthday. We're birthday twins.
That's right.
April 23rd.
April 23rd. Shakespeare's as well.
Shakespeare's birthday and death date.
Death day as well.
Yeah, this is a really morbid conversation.
This really is, isn't it? Oh, well. I mean, look, death and life sit right next to each other, don't they? Comedy and tragedy, the whole thing, right? So,
all we've been thinking about for the last year.
I know we'd be remiss not to say it, but it's lovely to see you, dude. You're looking excellent, I have to say. Unlike me, I have put on I don't know how many pounds this last week. You look as trim and handsome as ever. And
go on.
Yeah, don't stop now. And I want to talk to you about so many things because obviously, not only are we friends, but also I haven't caught up with you in years. And also you've got all these exciting things going on in your life and have had exciting things that you've done since that I've not been able to talk to you about. So there's loads of exciting things to do. And I don't know which order to do them either. I'll be honest with you, Jeffrey. But you know what I think is probably the best place to start off is the fact, because it's time sensitive, that you're actually running for a district in Manhattan. It looks like perhaps the swankiest one. District 6, right, which is like Central Park, Upper
West Side. Yeah.
Have I got it right? So that's a very, very nice area. I've spent some time there myself. It's gorgeous. And you're running against, no, there's an incumbent who's retiring. Am I getting all this wrong? Tell me. I'm not.
Yeah, it's an open seat. So I'm running for City Council District 6. It's the Upper West Side, Lincoln Square, a small part of Clinton, which is like West Hell's Kitchen. And it's a beautiful neighborhood, and I'm so incredibly lucky that I get to call it home.
Lovely.
It's also where I had my first job in the city, my first acting job. I made my stage debut at Shakespeare in the Park at the Delacorte Theater right here in Central Park, and I fell in love with this neighborhood, and I can't believe that it's now my home.
Yeah, it's a great part of the city.
Yeah, but it's an open seat. The incumbent is term limited, and there are 6 candidates vying to replace her. And so far we're running a pretty great campaign, and I think we have a decent shot at this.
I hope so. I've been very impressed by your social media and your messaging. It all looks very, very good. It seems like you have a good team behind you. But you're not entirely new to this, are you? Because you've helped out on Democratic campaigns before, and you've been part of committees and stuff for fair wage and all of that stuff. So although this is it's a bit new, you've got a bit of a past in it, don't you?
Right. Yeah. I've been working in Democratic politics for almost 20 years. Anytime there's an election, I try to do what I can to get involved and make sure that we elect good candidates.
Yeah.
This is my first time running for public office, though I do have a little bit of election experience myself. I got involved with my labor union through a campaign called Fair Wage on Stage back in 2016. I was working off Broadway at a fantastic theater, and my take-home pay after taxes was about $400 a week. And when you live in Manhattan, it's really tough to pay your bills on $400 a week.
That sounds familiar.
So I got together with some colleagues, and we started organizing. We created this campaign and this movement, Fair Wage on Stage. And we organized the entire off-Broadway theater community to sign petitions and wear buttons and make video testimonials. And that campaign gave our union leverage at the negotiating table to demand some real wage increases. So that year, we got between 32 and 83% wage increases, and it shattered every record in our union's history.
Oh, wow.
So from that moment on, I was hooked as a labor organizer, and I ran for a seat on my union's council, and I was elected. I was just recently reelected to a second term.
Congrats.
And thank you. So I have a little bit of election experience. And things were going pretty well for us. Broadway had a record-breaking year in 2019, sold more tickets, had greater revenue. We were having a lot of success at negotiating higher wages and better contracts and more job opportunities for our more than 50,000 members across the country. Right. And then this pandemic hit, and it shut down our entire industry. Yeah. And all of our members have been unemployed for almost a year now. And this past summer, we realized that help wasn't coming for us at any level of government. We were getting left out of the conversation. At the time, the U.S. Senate was negotiating the HEROES Act. And it was going to be, another big stimulus package in the middle of this pandemic. And it looked like the arts was going to get left out again. So we scrambled and started organizing a new campaign called Be an Arts Hero. And we organized the national arts community to collectively lobby the US Senate for direct arts relief. And our organizers met with over 60 US Senate offices. And we found a pretty receptive message with both Democrats and Republicans, talking about the number of jobs that are created by the arts and culture sector, the total economic impact for each of their states. And when you talk about it in those economic terms, even people who aren't thinking about the arts all the time start understanding just how important this sector is to the greater economy.
Yeah.
And they passed that stimulus package in December of this past year, and we got $15 billion in direct arts relief in that package, which is huge. Yeah. And it'll go a long way towards saving a lot of the venues that we perform at. But we have a lot of work to do to make the rest of the community whole, and make sure that the actual workers who have been unemployed over the last year can find their way back to work.
Yeah. I mean, what always blows my mind, because, I've always got one foot in the States with Caitlin and everything, and I've just always been that way anyway, is how creatives have managed to survive over there. Like, I've got a friend called Travis, who's a fantastic actor.
I love that guy.
Yeah, right? And he's had to take a night job at a hotel to sort of make ends meet. And, we're all having to scramble to make ends meet. But my point is that even over here, and we've got a conservative government, and you did until recently, they have paid out, I think to this point, to me personally, about £15,000, something like that, in separate grants, because I'm self-employed, right? Something like that. And people in the States, up until a month or two ago, had one check of, was it $600, $1,200?
So yeah, we got $1,200 at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we got another $600 in December. The Senate's about to pass another stimulus package, and I think we'll be getting another $1,400 from that.
Yeah, I mean, long overdue. Have you got any? It doesn't have to be about yourself, but how have your friends or people survived without that support?
Everybody's in a slightly different boat. I have a lot of friends who have moved out of the city, and some of them plan to return eventually, but they're in their mid-30s and living with their parents,
right?
Which is not a situation that they want to be in. I'm very lucky that that was not my situation. Yeah. But a lot of people are deciding for themselves if this is a career that they can return to.
Yeah.
After a year away, what is this industry even going to look like? How will we get back to work? How will they be able to rebuild a life for themselves in New York City after all this, especially after depleting their savings or. Yeah. It's a struggle. Our people are really hurting right now.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an unimaginably difficult time. But going back to your messaging and your campaign, you seem pretty confident and optimistic, and like you've got a plan for how to, or at least like some kind of roadmap for like what the future ahead looks like and how we can get back to those record-breaking, amazing West End, Broadway, all of that stuff. So could you fill me in a bit on that?
Yeah. So when we announced the campaign in November, I started sitting down with all the stakeholders in the arts and culture sector, from the Broadway League to the Off-Broadway League, the artistic directors of major cultural institutions, the unions, arts advocacy groups, just to figure out, what has your experience been over the last year? What do you need from the city in order to survive? What does that mean for your particular group or institution?
Yeah.
So I've had amazing conversations and it's helped me come up with a whole lot of ideas. So I've put together a pretty comprehensive arts and culture recovery plan. It's all outlined on my website, and it talks about the things that we can and should be doing right now. So, for instance, New York City passed this new open culture law, which allows artists and arts groups to apply for permits to perform on the streets and in plazas and parks.
Clever.
And this just went into effect a couple days ago. So we're still figuring out what this means, what it's actually going to look like in practice. I think it's a fantastic program. It's exactly what we need to get people back to work before it's safe to reopen our indoor venues.
Yeah.
I think it's not quite perfect yet.
No.
Not enough of the people who have been hardest hit by this pandemic will have access to this program, and so I think we can continue to fine tune it.
Right.
And if I'm elected, that'll be a big priority to make sure that this program continues, because how cool is it to be able to walk down the street and see a live opera performance, or a comedy show, or a dance company performing. It will bring this whole city back to life.
It's what we all need. It's what we've all been starved for, hasn't it? I mean, there's only so many Netflix shows that you can watch before you just want to actually see a real person. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I can't bring myself to. I also do stand-up comedy, but also there's like acting and stuff over Zoom, and I just can't bring myself to get involved in any of that stuff, because I would much rather see a crazy person on the side of the street, but a real person or a real performer, even better, than spend any more time through this screen than I already do.
Right. Yeah, I've done a few Zoom play readings. And
same. Yeah.
I think, with any medium, it takes a lot of creativity to figure out how do you make this an effective art form.
Yeah.
And so I think there have been some pretty creative Zoom performances over the last year. I think we've got a ways to go, though, before it becomes a medium that I really want to tune into.
You don't imagine there might be a new category in the Oscars anytime soon? Best Zoom performance. Right.
But that's not to say that there aren't great ways to put content online. I've become helplessly addicted to TikTok.
Oh, really?
Are you on TikTok?
I am on TikTok. I've only dipped my toe, to be honest, but I'm there.
The creators on TikTok are wildly inventive.
Yeah.
I don't make videos myself. I'm a happy passive consumer. But I love TikTok.
It is insane. I mean, it's definitely designed for 21st century brains, and the speed at which we consume and move on to the next thing is like encapsulated in this strange app that started off as just like a kind of karaoke thing and now is like, I don't know, the biggest video thing in the world.
It's taking over.
Yeah.
But to go back to your question, then the other things that we can be doing. So we have all of these vacant storefronts in the city, and space is one of the most valuable resources as an artist.
Yeah.
And so we could take all of these vacant storefronts and turn them into art galleries and rehearsal and performance spaces, because that's what the artists need right now. Another major obstacle for artists living in the city is that it's just so incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
We need exclusive artist housing. We have artist housing, but according to law, it's not exclusively for artists, but the city council could change that.
Explain that a bit more. I've not heard of artist housing.
Sure. Oh, you don't have this in London?
I don't think so.
So the idea is that we want to keep artists in our city.
Right.
And there are a few buildings across the city that are designated as artist housing. And so you get, you get a preferential rent, and it makes it affordable for us when, most of us are freelancers and we don't know what our next job is going to be.
Right.
It allows us to live in this incredibly expensive city. But the city government could could pass a new law to make it to make these buildings exclusively for artists.
Right.
It would give a lot more artists an opportunity to a chance at one of these affordable rental units.
Yeah, and also then increase the possibility for collaboration, and who knows what kind of new projects could come out of such an idea. That's a brilliant thing. I wish we had that here. That would be great.
Right, and if you look at when we're trying to spur economic activity, all the academic research shows that find the artists and the economic activity will follow.
Yeah.
Because people want to be where we are.
Right.
They want to be where there's arts and culture. They want to go out at night and they want to see things and do things and take in experiences.
Yeah.
And that's the economic impact that we have on the city as a whole. So then, after we do the things that we can do right now, we need to ensure the long-term survival of all of our cultural institutions. And the ones I've talked to are fighting for their survival right now. They don't know if they're going to make it through this pandemic. We're hoping to reopen this coming summer, but they are barely scraping by right now. So they need money and they need a jump start. And money is really tight at both the city and the state level right now. So if we can't get it from the government, where else could we look? And I've looked at the top 10 media and tech companies, places like Viacom, Comcast, Disney, Apple, Facebook, Google. They all have streaming services. And that's what's gotten us by over the last year, is we're all sitting at home watching TV.
Definitely.
And all of these streaming services use talent that was developed right here in New York's cultural institutions over many, many decades. And I think we have a pretty good argument to make to these companies that they owe a debt of gratitude to our cultural institutions. And also they want to ensure the long-term survival of these cultural institutions to make sure that talent is continued to be developed. Right. And it's not just the actors we're talking about, it's the writers and the designers and the musicians that are, all of this talent that goes into creating the shows for these streaming services that make these companies tons and tons of money.
Yeah.
So if we go to these top 10 media and tech companies and ask for just 0.2% of their cash on hand, that's just money that they have sitting around in their checking account, 0.2%, we could create a relief fund of over $1.1 billion.
Jeez.
And we have seen the greatest transfer of wealth over the last year. Jeff Bezos, he was rich before. He is now so unfathomably rich over the last year. It's not that we don't have money.
No.
The money is just sitting in different bank accounts than it was a year ago. So we can either tax those individuals and those firms, or we could ask for a one-time charitable contribution. And that's what this idea is.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah. Right. I mean, if you're talking about Bezos, he's got Amazon Prime, right? There's a ton of media on there, and it's growing. It's one of the more popular growing services. I use it. I assume everyone does, even if there are ethical quandaries with the service. I think even after he got divorced, he was still the richest man in the world after giving half of his wealth away. So he's definitely got a penny or two to spare. I guess the trick is getting his ear and getting his heart, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And that's why it's so important for us to elect a mayor who prioritizes arts and culture. So I've been saying from the beginning that even if I'm elected, I won't be able to get all this done on my own.
Right.
I'm going to need a whole lot of help. And we're in the middle of this incredibly competitive election cycle where over 20 people are in the running to be the next mayor of New York.
Wow.
We have almost 300 candidates running for 51 city council seats.
Wow.
So just this past week, I reached out to all the candidates who were running, and I asked them to sign a pledge, committing themselves to prioritizing the revitalization of arts and culture. And so far we have, I believe, 85 co-signers.
Oh,
85 other candidates have signed on saying that they will prioritize arts and culture, which is a major step
yeah.
in the right direction.
That's not bad. A third roughly in about a week. Like, that's, and politics is a tricky business, isn't it? It's the art of the possible is the quote I always remember. Have you experienced any of, and feel free to not say anything or skirt around this, but have you experienced any of the darker arts aspect of the political game?
It's funny. I because this was my first time running for office, as I was mulling over the idea, I sat down with every friend who works in politics, had ever worked on a campaign, just to pick their brain to figure out how to do this. And several people told me up front, trust no one in New York City politics. And I have to say, I've actually had pretty great conversations with most people. And I've developed some really, really great relationships over the last 3 months. I will say, I had no idea what was going to happen when we announced this campaign.
Of course.
I did not realize that we were going to receive more individual donations than any other candidate running in Manhattan. We received over 630 individual donations, and about a third of those donations came from individuals who listed their occupation as unemployed.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so that just shows me that our message is resonating, that these donations are largely coming from arts workers who have been the ones who have been struggling the most. It's our industry that shut down the first. We're the last ones who are going to be going back to work. So they are desperate for a champion right now. But I didn't know what was going to happen. And the only pushback I've received from anyone has been from people who have been entrenched in New York City politics for a very long time.
Right.
I think when you're involved in any kind of organization, whether that's a political party or a union or whatever else, you start getting comfortable. Mm-hmm. And the status quo starts making sense to you, and you're probably benefiting from the status quo.
Definitely.
But the problem with New York City just in general, is that the status quo is not working for nearly enough of us.
Yeah.
And there are so many people who I've met and talked to over the last 3 months who feel ignored and abandoned, and even talked down to by some of our elected officials. So I'm doing my best to bring those people into the conversation and make sure that their voices are represented. But yeah, I wouldn't call them dark forces, but there are certainly establishment forces that are not interested in shaking things up. Mm-hmm. That the status quo is working for them just fine, and they don't want to change.
Yeah, and presumably they were, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed when they first came in, and all about changing things up and establishing a new order. And then as time goes on, like you said, it just becomes a different thing, doesn't it?
And I think that's true for all of us. That's just human nature. Yeah. I see it in myself. We were when I was elected to my union's council, I was one of the rabble rousers. Right. And now I've been around for 5 years, and we see this new crop of advocates coming in. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's a lot of energy. It's just human nature, Yeah. But I'm looking forward to being a rabble rouser on the New York City Council.
Well, I couldn't wish you more luck. So for people who are eligible to vote, we'll repeat this information at the end, but just let's get it down now. What are the steps they can take?
Yeah, so the primary I'm running in, it's the Democratic primary on June 22nd. And there is no Republican primary in this district. This district is very Democratic. That's not to say there aren't Republicans. I've met and I've talked to the Republicans, but there's no Republican primary. So whoever wins the Democratic primary in June 22nd, will go on to win the general in November.
Right.
It's all about June 22nd. In order to vote, you have to be a registered Democrat. The deadline for, if you live in the district, the deadline for registering the Democratic Party has already passed.
Okay.
But if you are new to the district, and you're already a Democrat, you can still register to vote for the upcoming election. We're using ranked choice voting for the first time ever.
Are you?
Yeah.
This is a great system.
Yeah, I don't know if they're using it anywhere in the UK. Do you know?
We have it in Northern Ireland, and we have it for some small, not the national elections, but some smaller local or mayoral elections. Some of them use ranked choice.
Yes. Now I remember NPR did a story about a ranked choice voting election in Northern Ireland, where they followed a candidate who, in the first tabulation of votes, was way behind. And she assumed that she lost. But then at the second tabulation of votes, she picked up all the second choice votes and she won. Couldn't believe it. And that's what ranked choice voting is about. It requires the winner to receive a majority support, not just a plurality. So in previous elections, you go in, you vote for one candidate, and that candidate in a crowded field, that candidate could win with like 30% of the vote, which is just crazy. Why should any candidate win with 30% of the vote? So ranked choice voting, you go in, and in New York, you're allowed to rank up to 5 candidates according to preference. And this way, there's no spoiler effect. And after the first tabulation, if no one receives more than 50%, the lowest vote getter is eliminated. And the second choice votes from that candidate is reallocated to the remaining candidates. And that continues to happen until one person receives more than 50%. Yeah, it's a much more democratic system in a country that is a democracy, ostensibly. Right. So but it makes perfect sense, right? So this is our first time using it. Okay. And so we really don't know how it's going to work out. Yeah, I'm imagining there'll be a lot of people confused at the ballot box. Do you put the number next to the name? Is that how it works? I think if you can picture it this way, you have the names of the candidates on the y-axis, and then you have the number rankings on the x-axis, and then you put a check where your preference is for each of the candidates. There we go. Well, good luck with all of that, and people getting very confused by it, I'm sure. But progress is slow and long, but eventually I think it arcs towards the good. That's it's an amazing new step for you, and I really, really hope that it works out well for you. Thank you, Monsieur Omura. But let's not talk only about politics, because I want to talk about stories about us, and I want to also talk about, because I've been looking at your IMDb, right? Because you're a very talented actor as well. And I saw you in this show because it's basically my favorite TV show, but I want to talk to you about it, which is you were in an episode of Succession. Yeah. Somehow I knew that was going to be the one you were. I mean, isn't it just the best? For anyone who hasn't seen it, from the writers of Peep, well, actually one of the writers of Peep Show, and made, I think, it HBO in the US, and it's also tied with Channel 4 in the UK. I actually didn't know that it was from one of the writers of Peep Show. Yeah. That Peep Show is one of my all-time favorite television shows. But now that you know, can't you see some of the links between some of the humor? Yeah. I've always wanted to do an American version of Peep Show. Yeah. I mean, I can't believe one doesn't exist yet. Surely it would be a massive hit. Come on over here. We'll do it. Well, I'm working on it. I was going to be over there, but whatever. We'll get to that, I'm sure. But tell me a bit about your experience of working on Succession. What was that like? Well, I have to say, Brian Cox is the kindest man I have ever worked with. We spent the day on set together, and he's been a long time idol of mine. just so incredible in every role he plays. And it was so, it was really exciting to watch him work on set. That I'm reminded of advice that Al Pacino gave to Jesse Eisenberg. And Jesse told this story in some talk show where he said, Pacino said to Jesse Eisenberg, just because the director yells action doesn't mean you need to start acting. I thought that's such great advice.
That is wonderful. Yeah.
And Brian Cox just really encapsulates that idea that it's just seamless. There's no acting involved, that from the moment before the director yells action to the moment after, it's all there. It's all in the same man. There's no artifice to it. It's really cool to watch. But at the end of the day, I said, Brian, it was so great to work with you. And he grabbed my hand and looked me in the eye and he said, "It was so wonderful working with you. I hope we get to do it again one day." I'm like, Brian, he's still my heart. He is a very charming man.
That's amazing, because obviously Logan Roy, the character he plays, is one of the biggest POSs out there. And if you've ever watched the documentary about the Murdochs, now they swear Succession is not about the Murdoch family, okay? But there's an amazing, I think it's 3 or 4 part documentary about the rise of the Murdoch empire. They own Fox, they own The Sun, they own huge, right? The parallels between the two are remarkable. So it's definitely worth seeing. If anything, I would say maybe Murdoch's even worse than Logan Roy, because at least Logan Roy seems to have a sense of humor. But that's now, right. I said it.
Did you see Ink when it was in London? The play Ink about the Murdoch family.
I did not get to see that play.
So it transferred to Broadway here in New York, and I got to see it. And there are some really extraordinary performances. Bertie Carvel.
Oh, right, friend of a friend. I know Bertie. Yeah,
and a good friend of mine was in it. A friend of mine who's actually working on my campaign now, doing research and policy work for me. Its story of the Murdoch family is extraordinary. The empire
really is.
That he built, and how he changed the way that we talk about the news and current events.
Yeah, I know.
In both of our countries.
Yeah, definitely. I just out of curiosity, obviously you're a Democrat, you're a New Yorker, although of course you're not born in New York, but I'm sure you consider yourself a New Yorker. You've been there for a long time. Are you just having a sigh of relief that the big orange man is gone? Or does he still haunt the city?
It's such an incredible relief. We have gone through so much trauma over the last 4 years because of his administration. And it's a hard thing to, I don't think we have not come to terms with it. And of course it climaxed in the insurrection at the Capitol, which we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. And people have not been held accountable. And there are members of Congress who possibly aided and abetted that insurrection. It's going to take a lot for the country to heal. But man, we always talk about how divided we are in politics, but it's never been like this.
No,
it's never been like this. And I don't know how we walk it back.
That is that's I fear for it, and good luck to you, because you're entering a fray, like you say, that is so bitterly divided, and no one seems to have really any road. There are a few things we can agree on, it seems, like like the GME stock thing was funny. Like it seems like that's some
GameStop.
GameStop. The left and the right, for some reason, we can agree on that. Is there anything else? It seems vanishingly small, the amount of things. But I guess part of the challenge is trying to find those things, and because a divided country doesn't help anyone, does it?
It really doesn't. And we're still seeing the effects of it. It was a year ago that Trump started using the phrases Kung flu virus and Chinese virus. And, I would watch those press conferences and I was scared because I knew exactly what was going to happen. And for the audience listening at home, I am an Asian American man. I will be the first Japanese American elected to office in New York State.
Amazing.
So to hear Trump get up there and use those racialized slurs, I knew that we were going to start seeing hate crimes against Asian Americans. And sure enough, hate crimes have skyrocketed in this country against Asian Americans. And here in New York City, where especially our senior citizens who are walking down the street and getting shoved down on the pavement or getting slashed across the face and stabbed. It's terrifying stuff. And, that kind of hatred, didn't start with Trump.
Right.
It's been, Asian Americans have been facing it for as long as we've been in this country, which is since the 19th century.
Well, yeah, right. That's the original story, isn't it? The indentured servitude or slavery of the railroad, right? That's
indentured servitude and the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Asian Exclusion Act, and then Japanese internment and the wars in Korea and Vietnam. It's been with us for as long as Asians have been in this country. Yeah. But a year ago, when Trump started using those phrases, we saw the hate crimes starting to skyrocket. And how do you put that genie back into the bottle once it's released?
I don't know, because even the storming of the Capitol doesn't result in impeachment. I listened to this. So there's this good podcast by it's called Mea Culpa, right? I don't know if you've heard of it, but Michael Cohen, who I'm sure you have heard of, Trump's former fixer, attorney, all of that. Mm-hmm. He's under house arrest at the minute for various reasons, and he's basically turned like full 180 from being in Trump's corner to his biggest critic. And it's a foul-mouthed, hilarious weekly show. I recommend you listen to it. Why did I bring it up? Because, we're talking about his use of language and stuff, and there was things about, apparently there's tapes, right? There's all these tapes of Trump on The Apprentice using all these words, and that people are trying to get him to be released. And it's like, his point is like, you don't need the tapes. Look at everything he says. Look, he's obviously a racist. You don't need to, like, I did you see, now this is going back a bit, but this blew my mind. I remember when he was giving the coronavirus briefings. So this is kind of old news, but it was just so eminently watchable as a moment of history. He's up there talking, and it's when he's talking about, maybe we can find a way to inject bleach or put sunlight in our blood. And there's this woman, I think her name is Deborah Nix, I might be getting that slightly wrong, who's like a medical doctor. And she sat there on the side, just with this ashen face, just listening to this buffoon spout dangerous nonsense, whether it be racist things that mean then there's more attacks, or bad science that mean then people are hospitalized, or all of that. I feel like, getting a bit overheated about it, and it was months ago, but that's probably my own issues.
Right. But to go back to your question, we are all breathing an enormous sigh of relief to have a reasonable man in the White House right now. And he has already done so much good since he was inaugurated on January 20th. But it's going to take years to repair the damage of the last 4 years.
Yeah, it is. And that the Senate being 50-50 is going to make anything passed pretty tricky. I saw the minimum wage thing has already been shot down. It only takes one person to sort of nix that, and then you've only got sort of a year and a half until midterms when everything could change. It's like it's strange from an outsider's point of view. You have such a vanishingly small window of time to get things done. But then I read that like senators, I think, is it every 6 years? And then Supreme Court justices are for life. And it just seems a very strange contradiction in that. Why is it that some of these, like you said, you have incumbents who aren't allowed to run again, which I think that makes sense to me, as opposed to lifetime appointments, which seem bizarre.
Right. Well, we have different rules at the city level than at the federal level. So we have term limits here, which are which I think are great. I think we need new people, new ideas to represent us. At the federal level, there are no term limits, so that there are some members of the House, some members of the Senate who have been there for over 40 years. And then the Supreme Court is there. We're talking about the Supreme Court. They get lifetime appointments. The idea being that will grant them, that will give them the freedom to rule fairly without having to face an electorate.
Right.
We could certainly put a time limit on the term that was given, and then someone else could fill that seat.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has been interesting watching some of their rulings, because obviously Trump had this crazy sort of dream that he could put people on the court that would sort of act like his proxies, so he rushed through after RBG died. He rushed through all of the Coney Barrett thing, and he installed 3 Supreme Court justices in a case of 4 years. And he obviously has this crazy idea, because he's, a narcissist and all the rest of it, that they'll just do his bidding. And thankfully, we have seen some of these rulings lately, right? Like the Philadelphia one with the voting irregularities, quote unquote, just tossed out. And it gives you some, like you said, the healing process will be long, but things like that give you some sigh of relief of like, okay, not everyone is infected with Trump derangement syndrome. Not everyone is an acolyte or the opposite of an acolyte, which I can't think of right now because I'm tired.
Yeah, our democratic system is screwed up in so many ways. The Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president, and because both George W. Bush and Donald Trump lost the popular vote.
Yeah.
5 of the Supreme Court justices, 2 who were appointed by Bush and 3 who were appointed by Trump, were appointed by presidents who did not receive a majority support of the American people. And that's why we have this 6-3 conservative majority on the United States Supreme Court.
And that's not going to change. There's no way the electoral system is going anywhere. I know that it's a talking point that kind of comes up every election cycle, but the reality is, like, if you read up on how it would be in order for it to change, there's just no way you'll drum up enough support from the, like you say, from the people who've been there for 40 years. Why would they? And the grassroots individuals coming in, they'll have all the fire under their belly and none of the power to do it. And
right.
Do you envisage a future in which that will ever change? Am I being too pessimistic?
Well, there's actually a possibility that it could change. There's this interstate compact that's been going around for several years now, where, according to the Constitution, each state gets to determine how they assign their electoral college votes. It's totally up to the state to determine those rules. So, several states have banded together to pledge that they will give their electoral college votes to whichever candidate wins the popular vote.
Interesting.
It's called the Popular Vote Interstate Compact, I think. And it only goes into effect once a number of states whose electoral college votes add up to a 270 majority sign this pledge.
Mm.
So once we have that 270 majority, then the popular vote will rule the day.
That's an interesting way of sort of hijacking the system and making it fairer. That's
right. So I'm sure there will be legal challenges when that comes into effect, but it's a real possibility.
Well, that's very interesting. And speaking of statehood, because this has been coming up in the news as well a lot. What are your thoughts on the various overseas territories, or be it Guam, be it American Samoa, be it DC gaining statehood? What are your thoughts around that? I'm
all for it. I mean, we should have made DC a state on the first day of Joe Biden's presidency.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. has a greater population than several states. It has a larger population than Wyoming, and Wyoming gets two U.S. senators.
Right.
There's no reason that Washington, D.C. shouldn't become a state and shouldn't have full representation in Congress. And then the other one is Puerto Rico.
Right.
Puerto Rico has, I think, 4 million residents in it.
Wow.
It's a U.S. territory and has a greater population than almost half of the U.S. states. So if they became a state, they get 2 U.S. senators plus I think 5 or 6 members of the House.
Right.
And I think that's got to be a real priority for D.C. I think D.C. is totally on board with it. Mm. Puerto Rico, it'll ultimately be up to them whether or not they want to become a state.
But I think they quite consistently vote slightly in favor of becoming one, right? As opposed to American Samoa, which I believe tends to vote the other way, that they don't want to become one.
With Puerto Rico, it depends. They've had a number of referendum votes on the issue, and it depends on how the question is phrased.
Right.
So in one referendum, I think there were 3 options to choose: to become a state, mm-hmm. to keep the status quo, mm-hmm. or to remain, or to become an independent country. Mm. And so when you divide it 3 ways then it's hard to get a majority for any of those options.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to know what's better because, the whole problem that happened in the UK with the Brexit thing, which nobody wanted and now everybody has, is that it was just a very simple yes-no option. And it was at a time when people were very angry. And when you're angry, you tick the box that expresses that anger. And instead of sort of being a well-considered, let me take into account all the facts, there's all the hate mongering and the fear, and that riles people up and they go in there and they, and then.
Well, let me turn the tables on you. As an Englishman, how do you feel about Scottish independence?
Oh, well, look, if they vote in favor of it, then, more power to them. That's, again, they've had quite a few referendums and they've all been very close to the 50-50 thing. I personally love Scotland. You've been. I've got a lot of friends who are Scottish, and I'm all for, I don't think we should have left the European Union. I think those states should be part of I'm all for having broader churches, not smaller, right? I understand small local government makes sense to me because you deal with the areas that there are. So devolution makes sense, but it kind of feels like a divorce, and divorces can be for the right reasons. But if it's because that we're somehow abusing the Scots, I'm not. I have no part.
Why are you abusing the Scots?
Well, that's how. I mean, look. Can I just say, I come from Irish and Jewish stock. Okay, we have not colonized anywhere, and but that's how some Scottish people feel, obviously, because the ultimate power rests in London to make decisions over people in Scotland. And I'm sure that's how people, that's a lot of the Texas independent thing is, why should those people in Washington decide what happens here, right? Which is why you've got that federalized system, which should, in effect, work. And I think if we had something a bit more like that here, there would be less of a need to have that independence streak. But the Scots have always been a very independent-minded people. So if they want it and they vote for it, they should be able to have it.
Yeah. Was it 2014 they had the Scottish referendum?
I think there might have been one more recently than that, but there have been a few, yeah.
It was that one. I remember staying up late to watch the results come in. And I don't know why I was so invested in this election. But I really, at the time, did not want Scotland to secede from the United Kingdom. I think just as an American, we need a strong United Kingdom.
Yeah.
It's one of our oldest alliances. It's one of our greatest partnerships. We share a lot of the same values. We need a strong United Kingdom.
Yeah.
But then after Brexit happened, my feelings on the matter really changed. And I started to say, oh, well, if England, and it really was England when you look at how the votes broke down geographically.
Yep.
Not London. It was England, the countryside outside of London.
Basically.
If they don't want to be a part of Europe, well, I don't see why Scotland, which very much voted to remain part of Europe, should have to leave.
Yeah, no, I know. But also, equally, if it's only, and it really is only sort of a few areas of countryside in the southeast and the northwest and Wales that decide that we don't want to be part of the European Union, why should all the rest of us have to be dragged out of it too? And I mean, you're talking about like packages for artists and stuff. Already, it's become almost impossible for any artists from the UK who want to go to Europe for any kind of job. The amount of paperwork and the costs associated with all of this has just skyrocketed. And I'm sure you know, when you're an actor coming up, you know, the smaller jobs and the touring and the going around, it really helps you build as a performer, as a person. You know, travel broadens the mind. And the first thing that happened when the Brexit vote was announced, and I've got it right here, is I got all my paperwork in order and I'm going to become an Irish citizen. So I will still be European, even if the rest of this silly country decides they don't want to be anymore.
So you'll have a British passport.
Yep.
And a European passport.
Yeah.
And then will you be able to get an American passport too, Caitlin?
And yes, I've checked. I'm allowed 3. So I'm hoping I'll be able to have 3 passports, Jeffrey.
Wow.
I don't really know why, but it seems like in this crazy world, I may as well.
Yeah. Well, when the apocalypse happens, you'll have many escape routes. That's what I always think about. What's my way out of here?
Yeah, I'll have my go bag for I'll look like a spy, actually. I've just realized.
Homeland Security will keep you extra long.
Exactly. Maybe I'll try and change my name a few times as well, make it extra complicated.
Over the past 4 years, a lot of Americans would say, if Trump gets reelected, I'm out of here. I'm leaving the country.
Right.
Going to Canada or going to Europe.
Like it's that easy.
And right. And I that was never a plan for me. And I think some of them were joking, but I always planned to go down with this ship.
Well, there we go. I think that's a noble thing. And also, if the ship's going down, you can try and patch it up, can't you? And see if we can't get this thing back afloat.
Right. If we all leave, and leave it in the hands of the Trump supporters, we're in trouble.
We're in trouble, exactly. Now, I'm mindful that I've taken up an hour of your time, so I won't ask for too much more. I just wanted to ask 2 little things. One, you in another of my favorite ever shows, High Maintenance. Mm-hmm. What was that like? You can just be brief. I love that show. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's a hilarious show.
Yeah, I had known the show was co-created by Katja Blichfield and Ben Sinclair, and they were married, and they created this little web series together that really took off, and then it was bought by Vimeo, and then later picked up by HBO.
Yeah.
I had known Katja for probably a decade. She was a casting associate at NBC, and so anytime I went into audition for 30 Rock, she was there.
Right.
I remember I spent some time out in LA, and she had just moved out there, and I ran into her at the NBC office. And I said, "Hey, how are you? How's it going out here?" And she said, "I hate it here. Can't wait to get back to New York." So we really bonded over that, because LA was not for me.
I was going to ask. That was my second question, because I saw you'd spent some time in LA. Yeah, that was going to be my second question.
Yeah, it was not for me.
Yeah.
So I've known her for a long time, and it was so cool to watch this web series they created just turn into this phenomenon. And I was honored when they asked me to play a small role on it. And it's it's such a tiny world. This that episode that I was on stars Will Jackson Harper, that people may know from the TV show The Good Place on NBC.
Right.
Another NBC show.
Yeah.
We released, my campaign released Will Jackson Harper's endorsement of my candidacy last week. So it's a tiny world. Yeah. It all comes full circle.
It all circles back, doesn't it? And of course, High Maintenance is about, for people who don't know, weed delivery. And I think I saw on your page, we feel free to cut all of this out, that you are for legalization, which I am as well. And I know it was just passed in New Jersey, and I think it's almost half the states now have some form. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is. We are way past the point of when we should have legalized marijuana.
Yeah.
The war on drugs has done so much harm
Yeah.
to this country, especially to communities of color,
Yeah.
where we have locked up generations
Yeah.
of people behind bars for these drug crimes that are now legal in many of the U.S. states. New York is behind the ball here. We need to legalize it, and we need to make sure that the revenue that comes in it goes to the communities that were disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs.
Absolutely.
And that they are the ones who were convicted of these drug crimes should be the ones to have the first dibs at getting these licenses to sell it legally.
Yeah. That's a great idea. Yeah, brilliant. There's some form of restitution, because, I mean, it's just so clear, isn't it? I mean, look at the states where it's been legalized. Have they descended into hellholes? No, they've flourished. They've created billions of dollars of jobs and income. And I mean, the world right now needs to A, chill out, which weed is good for, and B, start to make a bit of money, because no one's making money. And this is a good way of doing both of those things, I think. So
it's a great way. And because we're facing this enormous budget shortfall, both at the city and the state level, we have to get really creative about how we're going to raise revenue.
Yeah.
And legalizing marijuana and taxing it is just one of those ideas.
Yeah. Listen, I've taken up over an hour of your time, Jeffrey, and you've been really generous. Just tell people one more time how they can find you online for all of the things.
Yeah, jeffreyomura.com.
Very nice.
Sign up to volunteer. You can donate right there on the website. I have an extraordinary team of people working for me, and they are really expensive, so we need money to pay them. And I believe in paying people what they're worth.
Great.
So help us out. Send us a few bucks. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and Clubhouse.
Oh, you're on Clubhouse. There we go. Wow, up there hobnobbing with Elon Musk and Bezos, eh?
Oh yeah, every night.
And I'll put all the links and everything in the show notes and stuff, and I'll try and get this episode up as quick as possible, as this is all quite timely.
And the election is June 22nd.
Right.
I'm running in District 6 of New York City for the New York City Council. And I look forward to your vote.
Yeah, well, I wish I could, but I think Caitlin can, so I'll strong arm her if she can, and all of my New York friends, I'll bother them with this, and I wish you the absolute best of luck with this and everything you do. And it's been just really lovely to see you, and I can't wait until we can actually hang out again in person. That'll be a treat.
Yeah. Well, next time you're back in the States, it'll be for happier reasons.
Yes.
I hope.
Yeah, I will actually be there in October for a wedding, and
great.
Fingers crossed, everything should be roughly normal-ish by then. So let's hang out then.
Awesome. I'll see you then.
Okay. Take care, brother. See you.
Alrighty.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the show. If you've enjoyed it, please give us 5 stars and consider becoming a subscriber and maybe even supporting us on Patreon. Really, really, really helps me continue making this show. If you haven't enjoyed it, then you can fuck off. Many, many thanks to Nils Hennis Steer for the amazing music and to Dave Fox for the cool artwork. Please keep coming back every week for more Bliss of the Abyss.
Message 1.